This is the horizontal analysis of Jollibee Corporation's balance sheet or statement of financial position. This comparison is for the year ended December 31, 2019 and December 31, 2020. This is expressed in thousands. So for example, yung cash and cash equivalents hindi to 21,361,486 kundi 21,361,486,000. We can see in the balance sheet that the receivables and contract assets increased, then the financial assets at fair value through profit or loss had an amount in 2020. The financial assets held at fair value through profit or loss are the assets held for trading or yung in-acquire ng business with the purpose of selling it in the future. Yung receivables and other contract assets nag-increase possibly because of the rise in customers who acquire goods and services on account. Then the amounts with significant decline in the current assets are the short-term investments and inventories. This may be favorable if the short-term investments decreased because na-convert na siya into cash. Then the inventories, it can mean that Jollibee Corporation was able to sell faster than the previous year. Then the cash and cash equivalents together with the other current assets also increased, which is a good thing. So overall, 75% ang dumagdag sa total current assets as compared to 2019. Sa non-current assets naman, dito madaming nag-decline. So as a result, the total non-current assets decreased by 8%. The right-of-use assets are the lessee's right to occupy or operate a leased asset. So every year, it declines because it has a given rental period. Then both the operating and finance lease receivables decreased. On the other hand, the deferred tax assets increased by 37%, so it means that Jollibee paid more tax in advance. That is the only non-current asset account that increased significantly. So all in all, the total asset of Jollibee Corporation increased by 12%. Woo! Let us now talk about the liabilities and equity. In the current liabilities, the current portion of long-term debt and provisions increased. The provisions are set aside for future losses. So Jollibee Corporation set aside provisions for possible future loss kaya nagka-amount noong 2020. Yung liability for acquisition of a business nawala na, so as a result, the total current liabilities decreased to 88%. However, the case is not the same with the non-current liabilities. Almost all accounts kasi dito ay nag-increase. The only accounts with significant declines are the lease liabilities, long-term debt, and deferred tax liabilities. The non-current liabilities increased by 26%.
What?
So ang ending, the total liabilities of Jollibee Corporation is higher in 2020 with 106% than 2019 with 100%. So the last part is the equity. The capital stock net of subscription receivables is almost the same. Nag-increase lang ng konti. So the additional paid-in capital is the account with a significant increase, from 8.8 billion to 9.9 billion. The cumulative translation adjustments, these are the gains or losses from different exchange rates over time. So from 832 million, nag-decline siya down to a negative 477 million. The remeasurement loss on net defined benefit plan naman, nag-increase pero loss din siya. Also, the comprehensive loss on derivative liabilities. In short, the losses increased. Pagdating naman sa retained earnings, there are no changes in the appropriated portion. However, the unappropriated retained earnings decreased big time. From 23.9 billion naging 9.9 billion na lang. So if we sum up the two classifications of retained earnings, it is evident that it decreased. Then the treasury stock, walang changes. Ito namang senior perpetual securities, these are the fixed income with no maturity date. So nagkaroon ng ganito ang Jollibee Corporation noong 2020. Lastly, the controlling interests are when shareholders own less than 50% of the outstanding shares and wala siyang control sa mga decisions ng business. This is the account with the highest increase. So the total equity of Jollibee Corporation increased from 53.4 billion in 2019 to 68 billion in 2020. So that is the horizontal analysis of Jollibee Corporation's balance sheet.
So this is the horizontal analysis of Jollibee Corporation Statement of Comprehensive Income or the income statement. So here, the comparison will be from year year ended December 31, 2018 to the year ended December 31, 2020. The amounts are expressed in 1,000 pesos except per share data. So for example, here in the year 2020 for the gross sales, the amount that is shown here is 124,577,293. But because it is expressed in 1,000 pesos, this will be 124,577,293,000. So this horizontal analysis will help us easily identify whether there was an improvement or a decline in the accounts of our income statement. So for revenues, we have gross sales, sales discount, net sales, royalty setup fees, and others. PFRS 15 impact on system-wide advertising fees, the direct costs, and the gross profit. So let's start with the gross sales. For the year 2018, we have 100% value that is shown for all the accounts here in our income statements. Because this is our base figures, and the year 2019 and the year 2020 will become our trend percentage. So here we have 100% in the year 2018 for our gross sales. There was an increase in 2019 where we have 111%, and a decrease in the year 2020 where we have 81%. So let's see in the amounts from 153 billion, we went up to 170.2 billion, and we went down in the year 2020 to 124.5 billion. So next is the sales discount, where there was a continuous increase for the year 2019 and 2020. So in 2019, we have 118%, and in 2020, we have 116%. For the net sales, it has the same values in our gross sales, where we have 100% in the year 2018, 111% for the year 2019, and 81% for the year 2020. Let's go to the direct cost. The direct cost, we have an increase for the year 2019 and another decrease for the year 2020. And this continuous decrease, had affected our gross profit, where we have 100% in the year 2018, a small increase in the year 2019, where we have 102%, and we have another massive decrease for the year 2020, where we only end up to 47%. So for the amounts, we have 28.7 billion in the year 2018, we went up to 29.3 billion in the year 2019, and we went so down for the year 2020, where we only have 13.5 billion for our gross profit. So I think the decrease in this horizontal analysis is from the increase in our expenses, which had greatly affect our gross profit. So here, let's see our expenses. We have continuous increase in our expenses from 100% to 122% in 2019 and 154% in 2020. The same with only the advertising and promotions expense went down here from 100% to 99% to 66%. But the overall expense is still high, from 100% in 2018 to 117% in 2019 and 135% in 2020. So in our interest income and expense, for an interest income, we have a decrease from 100% to 94% to 53%. While for the interest expense, we have an increase from 100% in 2018, 122% in 2019, and 145% in 2020. So this result in our equity and net earnings or losses of joint ventures and associates, where we had net loss in 2018, which shows 86.7 million. That increase in 2019, that result to an earning of 23.3 million, but it caused a massive increase in the horizontal analysis, which shows an increase in our loss for 1.1,081,308,000. So these earnings will be attributed later here in our net income or loss. These earnings or loss will be attributable here in our net income or loss attributable to equity holders of the parent company and non-controlling interest. So here in the other income, we have an increase in 2019 and another decrease in 2020. And in our income loss before income tax, we have 100% in the year 2018, and in a small increase for the year 2019, which had 102%, and a very massive loss in the year 2020, which resulted to a negative 129% in our horizontal analysis, with this amounting to 13.2 billion. So for our provision for benefit from income tax, for the current, we have a continuous decrease for the year 2020, which is from 100% in the year 2018 to 115% in the year 2019, and we have only 55% in the year 2020. For the deferred, we have a massive increase in terms of loss, where we have a 2.2 billion loss here, the result to 1,554% in our horizontal analysis. So for the net income or loss, we have 100% for the 2018. We decrease in 2019 and have only 98%. And we even decline the year 2020 where we have a negative 165%, amounting to 12.6 billion. So here, other comprehensive income, there is a negative value, continuous negative value for the year 2020, which is because of the net loss that was incurred in the JOLLIBEE Foods Corporation. So here, for attributing the net income or loss, we have the equity holders of the parent company, where we have decreased from 100% to 89% to negative 140%, which is amounting to 11.5 billion net loss that is attributable for the equity holders of the parent company. And for the non-controlling assets, we have a net loss of 1.1 billion, which is a 197% increase, is shown in our horizontal analysis. The same here for the total of 12.6 billion that shows negative 165% in our horizontal analysis. So it is the same here where we have a negative percentage in the year 2020 for the equity holders of the parent company, and a massive increase in terms of loss for the non-controlling interest, where we accumulated to 201%. So here, the last part is the earnings or loss per share of net income, where this is not expressed in thousands pesos, but it is only expressed to a loss of 10,445 for each share of the basic, and a loss of 10,433 pesos for the diluted, which is represented here in the horizontal analysis, which shows a decline from 100% in 2018 to 88% in 2019 and a negative 138% in 2020. The same with the diluted, which is from 100% to 89% to a negative 140%. So this is the horizontal analysis of the JOLLIBEE Foods Corporation income statement.
Good day, everyone. Now I will show you the JOLLIBEE Food Corporation vertical analysis of its balance sheet or its statement of financial position. So you can see here the statement of financial position of JOLLIBEE Food Corporation. The JOLLIBEE Food Corporation statement of financial position is expressed in thousand. For example, this inventory. Hindi natin siya babasahin ng 8,295,828. Ang basa dito is 8,295,828,000. So, you can see here the receivables and contract assets is increased in 2020. And the financial asset at fair value through profit or loss, it had an amount in 2020 because it is a asset that held for trading or yung inacquire ng business for purpose of selling it in the future. Yung receivables and contract assets is increased because the rise of customers of acquiring goods and service. And the cash and cash equivalent is also increased in 2020. Also, the other current asset is increased in 2020, and that is a good thing. Overall, the total current asset is increased by 38% in 2020 compared to the 24% in 2019. Now, let's move on to the non-current assets. So, you can see here the operating lease receivables and finance lease receivables is both decreased in 2020. Meanwhile, the deferred tax asset is increased in 2020, and that is the only non-current asset account that is increased significantly. So all in all, in the total assets of JOLLIBEE Food Corporation is increased. Now let's talk about the liabilities and equity. So in the current liabilities, the long-term debt and the provision is increased. The provision is set aside for the possible loss, and that is the reason why there is an amount in 2020. But the liability for acquisition of a business is nawala na. Total current liabilities decreased. Now, let's talk about non-current liabilities. However, the case here is not the same with the current liabilities because almost all accounts here is nag-increase. The only account that that significantly decreased is the lease liabilities here. It is the only amount that decreased in 2020. And the long-term debt and the deferred tax liabilities is also decreased in 2020. Now, let's move on to the last part of the balance sheet, which is the equity. So, yung capital stock of net of subscription receivable is nag-increase ng konti, as in konting-konti lang. Additional paid in capital is an account with a significant increase. As you can see here, it has an amount of 9,913,890,000. The cumulative translation adjustment of foreign subsidiaries and interest in joint ventures and associates is the account of exchange that is changed over time. Here, the measurement loss is interest, but it is a loss. Amount na naka-parenthesis is mga losses. Now let's talk about the retained earnings. The appropriated account is the same, but the unappropriated account is decreased big time. As you can see here, from 23,879,437,000 to 9,869,889,000. Laki ang na-decrease nila ng 2020 compared to 2019. And lastly, the total equity of balance sheet of JOLLIBEE Food Corporation is increased in 2020 from 53 billion to 68 billion. And that's the vertical analysis of balance sheet of JOLLIBEE Food Corporation.
Ako po si Princess Simon para explain yung vertical analysis ng JOLLIBEE Foods Corporation. Okay, first of yung pinakauna is, kung mapapansin niyo po dito sa screen natin, meron dito yung statements of comprehensive income ng JOLLIBEE Corporation, kung saan merong pinag-compare yung mga income statement mula noong 2018, 2019 hanggang 2020. So kung mapapansin niyo dito, yung gross sales niya is noong 2020 umabot ng 124 billion, 557 million, 293, and then yung 2019, 170 billion, 291, 063, tapos ng 2018, 153 billion, 68 million, 666. So kung dito pa lang sa gross sales, mapapansin na po natin, noong 2018, nagsimula siya nung kumita ang JOLLIBEE noong 2018 ng 153 billion, 68 million and 666,000. And then in 2019, mas kumita siya ng mas malaki, which is kumita siya ng 170 billion, 291 billion, 063,000. Tapos ng 2020, ito kasi yung year kung saan kailan nagsimula yung panahon ng pandemic. Kaya kung mapapansin nyo, bumaba yung gross sales niya from 170 naging 124. Kung titignan po natin lahat dito, mula sa sales discount, net sales, hanggang sa direct cost, gross profit, expenses, interest income, hanggang dito po sa total comprehensive income, kung mapapansin natin, sobrang laki ng binaba noong 2020 ng JOLLIBEE, which is nung net income niya is loss pa kasi nagkaroon pa ng utang yung JOLLIBEE, which is 12,633,623,000. Ito yung nalugi ng JOLLIBEE mula nung nagkaroon ng pandemic, which is sobrang layo kasi noong 2019, kung mapapansin nyo, from 7 billion, nalugi siya ng kulang-kulang mga 5 or 4 billion. Yan, kaya nag-prepare po ako ng vertical analysis para mas maintindihan nyo kung paano yung nangyari yung ganito sa JOLLIBEE. Maintindihan po natin kung paano kino-complete ang vertical analysis ng JOLLIBEE Corporation. Ito. Yan, ito po yung mas shortcut ko or mas pinadali kong consolidated comprehensive income ng JOLLIBEE Foods Corporation, kung saan yung net sales ng 2020 is 129, which is makikita nyo po siya dito sa balance sheet. Yan, given na po siya. Kaso, bakit dito, kung mapapansin nyo, iba yung amount ng net sales dito sa balance sheet compare sa income statement na ginawa ko. So yung net sales, nakuha siya dahil yung gross sales, minus po natin yung negative 3,332,250,000, kaya nakuha yung net sales na 129,313,002,000 at saka noong 2019, 179,661,018,161,167,782. Yung cost of goods sold naman po, nakuha natin siya dahil ito yung mga expenses na in-include or yung mga nagamit para makabuo ng isang product, which is it includes direct cost only, kung saan makikita po natin siya sa balance sheet, which is 115,726,337,000 siya noong 2020. So ito, makikita niyo po dito yung amount ng direct cost. Yan, kinapi lang po natin siya sa dito sa income statement na ginawa ko. So kung mapapansin niyo, para makuha yung gross profit, kailangan nating ipag-minus kung ano yung amount na nakuha ng net sales sa cost of goods sold. Kaya nagkaroon tayo ng gross profit. So kung mapapansin niyo sa gross profit ng 2018 to 2020, sobrang laki ng binaba kasi nga ng 2020 ito yung mga taon kung saan nagsimula yung COVID-19. Kaya kung mapapansin natin, noong 2018 nagkaroon ng 28 billion ng Jollibee. Tapos noong 2019, umangat ng nadagdagan ng 1 billion yung kinita ng Jollibee, which is 29 billion. Tapos noong 2020, sobrang laki ng binaba, kulang-kulang mga 10 billion, which is 13 billion lang yung na-incurred or yung nakuha na gross profit ng Jollibee. So ito, yung operating expense naman natin, paano natin nakuha yung operating expense? Kung mapapansin niyo dito, ito yung mga expenses. Yung mga expenses, ito yung mga ginagamit ng Jollibee para ma-promote yung kanilang product. So ito yung mga general administrative expenses, advertising and promotion. Alam naman natin kung gaano kahalaga yung mga advertising or promotion sa isang company, lalo na sa Jollibee, dahil food yung kanilang siniserve sa mga tao. Yun, so para makuha natin yung operating profit, kailangan lang natin i-subtract yung gross profit and operating expense. So kung mapapansin niyo sa 2020, mas mataas yung operating expense kaysa sa gross profit. Kaya nung 2020, ang operating profit na nakuha ng Jollibee is negative 12 billion, which is luging-lugi pa sila ng 12 billion kumpara mo noong 2019 na 6 billion ang kinita, tapos noong 2018 is 9 billion. Yan, so yung interest expense naman po, nakuha natin din siya dito, which is given na rin siya. Ayan, interest expense, kung makikita nyo, ito na po yung mga balance ng interest expense ng 2020, 2019, and 2018. So kinapi ko lang din po siya dito. Yan, para makuha yung profit loss before income. Ayan, para makuha po yung loss before income, yung 12 billion, negative 12 billion 811 million 463,000, minus ko po siya sa 343,561,036,000. Kaya nakuha yung 16 billion, which is hindi ko na po siya napakita dito. Pero pag pinag-subtract niyo po yun, ang makukuha po nating is negative 16 billion 372 million and 499. Tapos i-minus pa po natin siya sa 1,081,381,000, which is ito po yung equity in net earnings losses or joint venture and associates. Tapos para makuha po yung 17 billion, kailangan po natin silang ipag-subtract. So, ang kaya makukuha natin is negative 17 billion 453,807. Tapos ipa-plus lang po natin yung other income na 4 billion 161,177. Para makuha yung negative 13 billion 292,630 para sa profit before income tax. Pero dahil nga po yung 2020, kung mapapansin nyo, is negative siya. So, ibig sabihin hindi siya profit. Kung hindi yung income na nakuha ng Jollibee noong 2020 is loss kasi may utang. Nagkaroon pa po sila ng utang or nalugi yung corporation nila. So, kung paano natin nakuha yung profit or loss before income tax ng 2020, ganun din po noong 2019 and 2018. Yan. So, ito po yung income tax expense, which is makikita na po siya, given po siya dito sa kita niyo po siya sa sa balance sheet. Yan. Which is ito po yung negative 659,007,000 noong 2020, tapos na 3,055,170,000 noong 2019, 2,680,117,000 noong 2018. Yan, para makuha po yung net income or yung loss. Kung mapapansin po natin, hindi nagbago dun sa profit ng 2020 at saka nung net income ng 2020 is may utang pa rin sila ng negative ng 12,633,623,000 kumpara mo noong 2019 at saka 2018. Kasi noong 2018 at saka 2019 kumita pa po ang Jollibee. Yan, so ito na to yung pinaka net income or loss natin. Tapos itong mga other comprehensive income, ipag-aano lang din natin siya, isasama lang din natin siya, i-add lang po natin siya sa net income, kaya nakuha ang total comprehensive income niya na negative 14,415,367,000. Yan, kung mapapansin niyo po, saan makikita itong other comprehensive income? Ito, nakikita na po siya, given na po siya sa balance sheet ng Jollibee Corporation. Yan. Kaya nakuha po natin itong 415,367,000, tsaka 7,9,217,000, 8,150,871,000 noong 2018. Yan. So, ito po yung comprehensive income ng Jollibee Food Corporation. So, ito po yung vertical analysis na nakuha ko. So, kung mapapansin po natin, 100% siya nagsimula dito sa net sales noong 2020. Kasi sabi po kasi sa vertical analysis, yung vertical analysis is top line sales number as 100% and every other account will show as percentage of the total sales number. And to conduct a vertical analysis of income statement, sales figure is generally used as the base and all other components of income statement. Yan, so kaya 100% na po siya. So ipag-compare po natin siya lahat sa mga bottom line. So paano ba nakuha yung 89%? Ganito lang po yan. Yung net sales ng 2020, and cost of goods sold ng 2020 na, which is negative 115,726,337,000, i-divide po siya sa net sales ng 2020, which is 129,313,2,000, kaya nakuha yung 89%. Tapos dito naman po yung 11% ng 2020, kung mapapansin natin, paano nagkaroon ng 11%? Kung paano po yung ginawa natin computation para makuha yung 89%, which is yung gross profit divided by mo yung amount sa net sales noong 2020 para makuha yung 11%. Hanggang sa lahat kung paano po natin ginawa yung computation, ganun din po hanggang sa baba para makuha yung 11% ng total comprehensive income loss attribute. Yan 2019 ganun din po. Kung paano yung ginawa natin computation ng 2020, ganun din po para makuha yung mga percentage na nakikita nyo dito sa 2019 at saka sa 2018. And so kung mapapansin natin, yan yung mga percentage nila. Kung mapapansin po natin dito sa 2020, ang daming mga negative na percent. So ibig sabihin, nagpapakita talaga na sobrang laki ng nalugi ng Jollibee Corporation noong mga panahon ng pandemya. Kaya kung mapapansin natin, noong 2020, ang daming mga negative percentage ng Jollibee kumpara noong 2019 and 2018. Pero kung mapapansin naman natin, ng 2018 at saka 2019, yan, yung mga ano po nila, yung mga comprehensive income nila, wala namang nagbago, wala namang iba, wala namang tumaas, hindi naman din bumaba. So ibig sabihin, maganda yung performance ng Jollibee Corporation noong 2018-2019 compared sa 2020. So, yun lang po. Yun lang po yung explanation ko dito sa vertical analysis. So, yung conclusion ko dito is sa vertical analysis. Yung vertical analysis, dito mo makikita kung profitable, but kung naging profitable. Ang conclusion ko lang po dito is, yung vertical analysis, pinapakita niya kung ano ba yung taon na mas profitable kumpara sa mga iba't ibang taon. So, kung mapapansin natin dito, noong 2020 talaga, hindi po siya naging profitable kasi sobrang laki ng nalugi ng Jollibee. So, noong 2019, yan, profitable po ang Jollibee Corporation at saka noong 2018 kumpara noong 2020. So, yun lang po. And thank you sa pakikinig.
In this part, I am going to analyze and interpret common ratios to assess the company's liquidity, solvency, profitability, and operational efficiency. So let's start with current ratio. So for the year 2019, it resulted the ratio of 0.68, and this means that for the period, the current assets of Jollibee cannot cover its current liabilities. However, in 2020, the ratio resulted 1.36, which means that current assets can pay the current liabilities of Jollibee Corporation. So, an asset test ratio for the year 2019, quick assets are smaller than current liabilities, and it results a 0.43, and that means quick assets cannot cover the current liabilities for the year 2019. Sorry. But in 2020, quick assets are larger than current liabilities, and it resulted 1.09. It's supposed to be 1.09, and it means that current quick assets can cover or can pay the current liabilities for the period 2020. Next, for cash ratio, we can see that in both years, total cash is smaller than the current asset. So this means that the total cash for both years cannot pay or cannot cover the current liabilities for both years as well. For debt ratios, we can see that for 2019, 71.53% of assets are financed by debts, and on 2020, 67.73% are financed by assets are financed by debts. So paano natin nalaman yun? So kung pinalitan natin yung accounting equation natin, which is asset is equals to liability plus equity. So that means 50% kay liability and 50% kay equity. So if debt ratio resulted a more than 50%, that means debt is higher than equity. So let's move on to debt to equity ratio. So for 2019, it resulted a ratio of 2.15, and for 2020, it resulted a 2.1 or 2.10. So this means that debt has more weight than equity, since it resulted on the ratio for 2019 and for 2020, it is greater than 1. So let's move on to times interest ratio. This measures how many times can earnings before interest and taxes are being deducted to cover the interest expense. So since Jollibee earnings have negative balance, that means it's a loss, and they cannot cover interest expense kahit isang beses. So for this, si Jollibee Corporation will likely to have an additional outside funding para ma-continue yung operational niya. So let's move on to efficiency ratio. So for asset turnover ratio, net sales over average total sales. So in the ratio, it resulted 0.61. This means that the company can only generate sales 0.61 times. Yun lang. Hindi pa umabot ng 1. Diba? So, parang ang baba niya. So, for the turnover ratio, measures many times can the company sell or the entity sell its inventory and replace it within the period. In the ratio, it resulted 12.67. So this means that the entity can sell their inventory 12.67 times and replace it within the period. Sales and inventory. So it measures how many days can we sell the inventory and have it replaced. So we simply divide 365 days divided by 12.67, which is yung the inventory turnover ratio, and it resulted in 28.81 days or 29 days for almost 1 month. So for for accounts receivable turnover ratio, it measures how many times can we turn accounts receivable into cash. So it resulted in 18.72. So pag kinonvert naman natin siya or binilang natin siya in days kung ilang araw natin mako-convert yung accounts receivable to cash, it is 19.5 days or 20 days. So for profitability ratio, it measures how well does an entity generate income that can relate to their revenues. So let's see here for gross profit ratio. So gross profit ratio, it simply measures magkano yung tinutubo natin for in every sale. So gross profit over net sales. And it resulted 11.21%. So for every 1 peso sale natin, meron tayong 11.21 na kinikita or tubo. So let's see on return on assets. So return on assets measures how much income was returned in using our assets to generate profit. So in here, since JOLLIBEE Corporation incurred loss, yung result ng ratio na yan, yung 6%, yan pa yung kabawasan sa ating assets in generating income. And imbes na magkaroon tayo ng income para may pangbawi tayo for assets, ayan pa yung magbabawas sa assets natin since the company incurred loss instead of income. And on the last ratio, which is return on equity, how much income was returned to equity in generating profit. So again, since the company have incurred loss, walang bumalik na income, nabawasan pa yung total equity ng kumpanya. So that's all.